So in this video we'll be using JSXSparker to create starter Hello World ExtendScripts and run them with Adobe Bridge and Adobe Premiere Pro on Windows, just to show a little bit different stuff. So I'll start from scratch. I'll first go to the website, the GitHub website, where we can download JSXSparker. So all we need to do is visit GitHub and click clone, download zip. So that gives us a copy of the GitHub repository without source code control. So it's just a snapshot, just all the files that are there. If I go into my downloads folder, I can find what I just downloaded. I can now extract all of this. Which gives me the Sparker folder. Now I'm going to rename it, so let's call it my test project or something. So I'll just rename the folder to my test project and I'll put it on the desktop. So I can get rid of this rubbish in the downloads folder. Delete. So here's my test project. And because we're on Windows, we'll now look at the Windows folder and later on maybe the DevTools folder, but first of all the Windows folder. So in the Windows folder, unlike the Mac, we don't really need to dequarantine the Sparker application, but we will need to tell Windows that it's okay to run it. So this project as it is now is currently not a script yet. So it is just a template for a script, but running the Sparker config application, I can actually make it into a runnable script. So this is typical. Windows will try to avoid you run dodgy applications, and you actually need to say more info and then run anyway to run Sparker config. Right, so then we get the JSXSparker configuration screen. And here you can configure a number of things. Some of them are application specific. For example, I could name the preferences file to be my test project preferences or something. I could name the directory name to be my test project. The name of the script in more readable terms with spaces, my test project. And we'll initially say target bridge. So we want to run the script with Adobe Bridge. So that's the parameters I want to give. All I do now is click generate. That's it. So very little seems to change, but if you go back one level up to the my test project, you can see there's a number of new things that have appeared, like period VSCode. That's an invisible folder on the Mac. It's a visible folder on Windows, which contains Visual Studio Code settings files. VSCode contains a workspace. The actual script is here, my test project JSX together with the my test project helpers. These two together form the script. There's a README and stuff you can edit, and so the main workhorse is here, the Windows folder. So this thing contains double-clickable batch files that you can run to achieve certain effects. So what I'll do first is now open this my test project in a text editor, and you can use any text editor you like, for example Sublime Text. Let's close what we have open here. Close, remove. Let's open the folder on the desktop. Desktop, my test project, open it. See, now I can actually inspect that script. So it's targeting bridge, it includes the runtime, and it has a little main script function which just says hello world. So now we want to run and debug this script in Bridge, because that's the target we've selected when we configured this. So to run it with Bridge, I can go into my tool bag, Windows tool bag, and do local debug install bat. And all I need to do is double click this batch file. So again, Windows is trying to be careful. You need to again say, well, run anyway, more info, run anyway. Yeah, Bridge launches, but here you can see it actually gives you some instructions, the My Project JSX in the Bridge window. So let's just run. So Bridge should open up in my test project. See, that's what actually this command line script did. It made Bridge go into our My Test Project folder. And now I can just double click this script. It's all typically a little bit slow, but this script will run. So see, like by the spinny cursor, Bridge is still launching. Will take a little wee while. Not responding. But it's fairly straightforward. So once Bridge is up and running, all you need to do is double click the script in the window that Bridge opened for you. So running a script with Bridge is different from the other applications in that it's not on a palette or whatever. All it does is it moves the Bridge view to your project folder, and then you just double click the script. So that's one way to run it with Bridge. Another way to run it with Bridge is to use Visual Studio Code, which will allow us to debug scripts. So, and when you launch Visual Studio Code, you also need to have the Adobe debugger, ExtendScript debugger extension installed. So that's two things you need to download and install. But then once that's done, you can just, oops, no, not open folder. You can open a workspace. And this automatically generated my test script folder. See, my test project here. There is a folder called VSCode, which contains a workspace file. So all you need to do is open that workspace file. And that, like Sublime, just as my text editor did, it shows you the whole project folder with the My Test Project script. You can actually see the test project script here. But the nice thing is also that it creates a launch setup for VSCode. So all you need to do is click the debug run setting, and here click the run button. See, and now the script also runs in Bridge. And I can also now put breakpoints. So for example, if I go back to my test project JSX, I can actually put a breakpoint here, then go to the debug panel and say run. See, and now the script has run and has stopped, and I can inspect variables and I can do anything I want and debug the script and run it step by step and so on. So what JSXSparker did for you is automatically set up VS Code with a proper workspace and a launch JSON file so that the script can be run from VS Code without having to do any additional configuration. So we'll now do the same with Premiere Pro. So I'll quit out of Bridge and VS Code here. And we're going to reset the project back to 0. So I kept that script separate from the window so you don't accidentally, because these scripts you would run over and over. Like if you're done running, you might run the clean, you might run the build to actually create a distributable version of your script. So these scripts will be used over and over and over again. So to avoid an accidental reset, I've moved the script for resetting the scripts folder in a separate DevTools folder. So all I need to do is now click Clean Generate. More info, run anyway. Delete, yes. And what happened now is that this folder, my test project, is now back to square one. It's exactly like I downloaded it from the GitHub repo. So there's no generated files in there. It's back to just a template. It's not runnable yet. So, and I need to go through the same motions. I open up the Windows folder, I run the Sparker, and because I run it just before, now Windows happily runs it without asking me permission again. I need to reconfigure everything, so it's really gone back to scratch. So I'll just leave it JSXSparker now, but all I will do is I'll target Premiere Pro now. So click Generate. Okay, and if we see in Sublime, see again, there is a difference. The script has been regenerated, so any changes I might have made are gone. But it now says target Premiere Pro, because that's the app we're going to target with this script now. So you can now also go back here and say local debug install, double click it. So what happens with Premiere Pro, there is no simple way to run scripts straight from the application. So this script has now automatically installed a little panel that will then run the script. So if I now launch Premiere, no, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to launch Premiere Pro. Then I will have an extra panel, so just to give me access to the script. So I'll again run the script in two different ways. One is using Visual Studio Code. The other one is using that little panel that is automatically added. And they're both independent, so you don't need to install the panel to or run that local debug install to run the script from Premiere. Now Premiere seems to be limited in that it wants a project open before it wants to run any scripts. So I'll just open a project I had which has nothing in it. Come on. It's not very fast. Like this. See, and if you look under Window, there is now under Extensions the Rorohiko script runner, which has a pop-up of scripts that are installed in the Adobe scripts in the Documents folder. So if we go to Documents, there is Adobe Scripts, there is Premiere Pro, and this is where the runnable script has been installed. And I click Run, and I get Hello World. And if I go back into my text editor and I change the script, see, this is the script that is actually in my test project, so which is sitting on my desktop here, desktop my test project. So I've changed this file. I go back to Premiere, that change is immediately reflected. So I don't need to update anything. I can just change, run, change, run, change, run. Alternate way of running and debugging is to use Visual Studio Code. I need to open up the workspace. So my test project has a workspace here. Okay, so the script is there. That's the Hello My World. So same thing, I just changed it. My nice world. So. And I can now immediately go to the Run panel and click Run. See, and here it's Hello My Nice World. So Premiere has run that script. I can also debug it from Visual Studio Code. So if I put a breakpoint there and rerun it, it'll stop. I can inspect variables, so everything works as expected. Oops, yeah, no, I need to click this one. And the nice thing is that period VSCode, that launch JSON, this is automatically generated by JSXSparker. So JSXSparker knows things like what the engine name is and what the target specifier should be. So all these things are automatically generated, and all those details you can ignore initially when starting to script with various Adobe applications. Right.